The moment Aisha delivered that swift palm strike to Derek's chest, the entire dynamic of Maplewood High shifted. For years, Derek had been the unchallenged ruler of the school, a force to be feared and obeyed. But now, his carefully constructed image of invincibility was beginning to crack. As he stumbled backward, crashing into the lockers, the students who had gathered around gasped in disbelief. No one had ever stood up to Derek like this before, let alone someone as seemingly quiet and unassuming as Aisha. Derek sat on the floor for a few seconds, clutching his chest where Aisha's strike had landed. The pain wasn't just physical, it stung deeper than that. It was the humiliation of being taken down by someone smaller, calmer, and, most infuriatingly, female. His face burned red with embarrassment as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some students snickered nervously, while others exchanged wide-eyed glances. One thing was clear: Derek's reputation was at stake. Aisha didn't wait for him to recover. She stepped back slightly, keeping her body relaxed but ready. Her grandfather's teachings echoed in her mind. In any confrontation, remain calm. Control your emotions, not the other person. Though she had acted instinctively to defend herself, she didn't want the situation to escalate further. With a steady voice, she repeated her earlier warning. "I don't want trouble," she said firmly, locking eyes with Derek. "But if you try that again, I won't hold back." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, daring Derek to make his next move. For a split second, he looked like he might lunge forward, fueled by rage and wounded pride. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the unwavering confidence in Aisha's gaze, or perhaps it was the realization that she wasn't bluffing. Whatever the reason, Derek hesitated, and in that hesitation, the spell of fear he'd cast over the student body began to break. Instead of retaliating, Derek scrambled to his feet, brushing off imaginary dust from his clothes. He glared at Aisha, his jaw clenched so tightly that it looked like he might grind his teeth into powder. "You think you're tough, huh?" he growled, trying to sound intimidating despite the obvious wobble in his voice. "We'll see about that." Without another word, he stormed off, shoving past the students who had gathered to watch the spectacle. The hallway slowly returned to its usual hum of chatter, though the energy felt different now. Excited whispers replaced the fearful silence that usually accompanied Derek's presence. Some students congratulated Aisha quietly, praising her bravery. Others simply stared, unsure of what to make of her. A few even asked questions like, "Where did you learn to do that?" Or, "Are you, like, secretly a ninja?" Aisha didn't answer most of these questions. Instead, she collected her books from her locker and headed to her next class, her expression calm and composed. Inside, however, her thoughts were racing. She hadn't planned to confront Derek head-on, but she also knew she couldn't let him push her around without standing up for herself. Her grandfather had always taught her that true strength wasn't about showing off or dominating others. It was about protecting yourself and those who couldn't protect themselves. Still, she couldn't help but wonder how Derek would react next. Would he leave her alone, or would he come back for revenge? Over the next few days, Derek became obsessed with figuring out who Aisha really was. At first, he tried to intimidate her again, lurking near her locker or glaring at her during lunch. But every time he approached her, she met his gaze with the same calm determination that had disarmed him in the hallway. There was no trace of fear in her eyes, only a quiet resolve that made him uneasy. It was as if she could see right through him, as if she knew exactly how hollow his bravado truly was. Frustrated and confused, Derek decided to dig deeper. He started asking around, hoping to uncover some dirt on Aisha. Surely there had to be something weak or vulnerable about her. Maybe she came from a rough background, or maybe she had secrets she didn't want anyone to know. To his surprise, the more he learned about her, the less sense she made. "She's smart," one classmate told him. "Like scary smart. She helps people with their math homework all the time. She's super nice to the younger kids," another student chimed in. "She sits with them at lunch sometimes when they don't have friends to hang out with. And she's always so chill," a third added. "You'd never guess she took you down like that." Each piece of information only deepened Derek's confusion. How could someone so kind and intelligent also be so strong? It didn't fit the stereotype of the tough girl he'd imagined her to be. If anything, Aisha seemed almost peaceful, and yet the memory of her striking him lingered in his mind, a reminder of just how powerful she could be when provoked. Eventually, curiosity got the better of Derek. One afternoon after school, instead of heading straight home, he followed Aisha. He kept his distance, hiding behind trees and parked cars as she walked toward an empty park on the outskirts of town. When she finally stopped near a grassy clearing, Derek ducked behind a bench and watched, his heart pounding with anticipation. What he saw next left him speechless. Aisha set down her bag and began stretching methodically, loosening her muscles, with slow, deliberate movements. Then, without warning, she launched into a series of martial arts techniques that were unlike anything Derek had ever seen. Her kicks sliced through the air with precision, her punches landed with controlled power, and her stances were perfectly balanced. Every movement flowed seamlessly into the next, creating a mesmerizing display of skill and discipline. It was as if she were dancing, but with a purpose far greater than mere performance. Derek couldn't tear his eyes away. He had always thought of fighting as something raw and chaotic, driven by brute force and anger. But what Aisha was doing was different. It was elegant, calculated, and undeniably effective. Watching her train, he realized that she wasn't just strong. She was disciplined, focused, and deeply connected to her craft. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Derek found himself reflecting on his own behavior. Why did he pick fights with people? Was it because he genuinely believed he was superior to them? Or was it because deep down, he was afraid of being seen as weak? The more he thought about it, the more he realized how empty his bullying tactics really were. They weren't signs of strength, they were masks hiding his insecurities. For the first time in years, Derek felt a pang of guilt. He had spent so much of his life tearing others down that he hadn't stopped to consider what it might feel like to build someone up, including himself. And now here was Aisha, a girl who had every reason to hate him, showing him what true strength looked like, not through violence, but through grace and self-control. By the time Aisha finished her practice and packed up her things, Derek was still sitting on the bench, lost in thought. He debated whether or not to approach her, unsure of what to say. Finally, gathering his courage, he stood up and called out to her. "Aisha," he said, his voice cracking slightly. She turned around, startled but not alarmed. When she saw it was Derek, her expression softened, though she remained cautious. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone neutral. Derek hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. I wanted to ask you something," he admitted. "How did you learn to fight like that?" Aisha raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by his question. After a moment, she replied, "My grandfather taught me. He was a Shaolin monk." Derek's eyes widened. "A real monk? Like kung fu and stuff?" She nodded. Yes, he believed that martial arts were about more than just fighting. They're about respect, patience, and understanding. The words hit Derek like a punch to the gut. Respect, patience, understanding. These were concepts he had never associated with strength before, but now they made perfect sense. Slowly, he lowered his gaze, feeling a mix of shame and admiration wash over him. "I'm sorry," he blurted out suddenly, surprising even himself. "I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. I didn't know who you were, or what you were capable of. But honestly, it doesn't matter. I shouldn't have done it." Aisha studied him carefully, searching for sincerity in his expression. Finally, she nodded. "Apology accepted," she said simply. "But remember, respect isn't earned by being stronger than others. It's earned by treating people fairly." Derek swallowed hard, nodding in agreement. For the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late to change, to become someone worthy of respect, not fear. And with that, the foundation for a new chapter in both their lives began to take shape. In the small, quiet town of Maplewood, life moved at a slow pace. The streets were lined with maple trees that turned brilliant shades of orange and red during autumn, and everyone seemed to know each other by name. It was the kind of place where nothing much ever happened until Aisha Johnson arrived. Aisha was 16 years old when her family moved to Maplewood from Boston. Her father had gotten a new job in the city, and her mother thought it would be nice for their children to grow up in a calmer environment. For Aisha, leaving behind her friends, her school, and most importantly, her grandfather's martial arts dojo, wasn't easy. But she tried to stay positive. After all, change could sometimes lead to unexpected opportunities. On her first day, at Maplewood High, Aisha stood out like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. She wore her curly hair in a high ponytail, her dark skin glowing under the fluorescent lights of the hallway. Her posture was straight, almost regal, as if she carried an invisible crown on her head. While some students whispered about how different she looked compared to everyone else, Aisha paid them no mind. Instead, she focused on finding her locker and getting to class on time. The teachers welcomed her warmly, introducing her to the class as our newest addition. Most of her classmates smiled politely, but there was one person who didn't seem too thrilled about her arrival, Derek Thompson, better known as Tank. Derek was a towering figure at Maplewood High. Standing nearly 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and a booming voice, he was the self-proclaimed king of the school. He ruled the hallways with an iron fist, or rather a clenched jaw, and made sure everyone knew his name. If someone dared to cross him or even look at him the wrong way, they'd quickly regret it. Over the years, Derek had built a reputation as the biggest bully in school, and no one dared to stand up to him. At first glance, Aisha didn't appear to be the type of person Derek usually targeted. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. In fact, she preferred staying in the background. But there was something about her quiet confidence that irked him. Maybe it was the way she walked, with purpose and grace. Or maybe it was the calm expression she wore, as if nothing in the world could rattle her. Whatever it was, Derek decided right then and there that he needed to put her in her place. It didn't take long for Derek to make his move. One afternoon, after gym class, Aisha was heading to her locker to grab her books. The halls were crowded with students chatting and laughing, but she kept her focus on the task ahead. Suddenly, she felt a large hand grip her shoulder and yank her backward. Startled, she turned around to see Derek smirking down at her. "Hey, new girl," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "What makes you think you can just waltz into our school and act like you own the place?" Aisha blinked, taken aback by his aggression. She hadn't done anything to provoke him, at least not that she was aware of. Still, she refused to let his words shake her. Keeping her voice steady, she replied, "I'm not trying to own anything. I'm just here to learn." Her response only fueled Derek's anger. In his mind, people like Aisha, people who didn't bow down to his authority, deserved to be taught a lesson. Without warning, he shoved her against the lockers. A sharp clang echoed through the hallway as metal met metal, causing several students to stop mid-conversation and turn their heads. For a moment, everything went silent. All eyes were on Aisha, waiting to see what she would do next. Would she cry, scream, run away? None of those reactions came. Instead, Aisha simply stood there, her back pressed against the cold surface of the locker, her expression unreadable. Derek leaned in closer, his face inches from hers. "You got something to say?" he sneered. Aisha took a deep breath, recalling the lessons her grandfather had taught her over the years. Master Kwame had always emphasized the importance of patience and restraint. "Violence is never the answer unless there is no other choice," he used to say. With those words echoing in her mind, Aisha made a decision. She wouldn't fight. Derek, not yet anyway. Instead, she tried to walk away, hoping to avoid further conflict. But Derek wasn't satisfied. He grabbed her arm tightly, twisting it as if to remind her of his dominance. Pain shot through Aisha's shoulder, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she closed her eyes for a brief second, centering herself. When she opened them again, her gaze locked onto Derek's. There was no fear in her eyes, only determination. That's when something inside Aisha shifted. She realized that walking away wouldn't solve anything. Sometimes standing your ground meant more than just protecting yourself. It meant showing others that they couldn't push you around without consequences. With a sudden burst of energy, Aisha twisted her arm free from Derek's grasp. Before he could react, she spun around and delivered a precise palm strike to his chest. The force of the blow sent him stumbling backward, crashing into the row of lockers behind him. Gasps filled the air as students watched in disbelief. No one had ever stood up to Derek like this before. Derek sat on the floor, stunned and winded. For a moment he stared up at Aisha, unsure of what had just happened. Then slowly, he began to get to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. But before he could retaliate, Aisha spoke. "I don't want trouble," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension in the hallway. "But if you try that again, I won't hold back." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Derek hesitated, torn between his pride and the realization that this girl might actually be tougher than she appeared. Finally, with a grunt of frustration, he stormed off, leaving Aisha standing alone in the now silent hallway. As the crowd dispersed, whispers erupted among the students. Who was this new girl, and why did she seem so fearless? Little did they know, Aisha's story was far from ordinary. What Derek and everyone else at Maplewood High didn't realize was that beneath her calm exterior lay years of discipline, training and wisdom passed down from one of the greatest martial artists of all time. And Derek's encounter with Aisha was only the beginning. As the school year drew to a close, Aisha found herself reflecting on everything that had happened since she first stepped foot into Maplewood High. What began as an ordinary attempt to adjust to a new environment had turned into something extraordinary, a journey of self-discovery, courage, and connection. She had arrived as a quiet outsider, but was leaving as someone who had touched the lives of countless students, including Derek Thompson. Derek's transformation wasn't just noticeable, it was remarkable. Gone was the arrogant bully who strutted through the hallways, throwing his weight around to intimidate others. In his place stood a young man who genuinely cared about making amends and helping those he had once hurt. He still had moments of doubt and frustration, especially when old habits threatened to resurface, but he worked hard to stay on the path of change. Aisha admired his determination, even if she rarely admitted it aloud. Their unlikely friendship had become one of mutual respect, with each of them learning valuable lessons from the other. One afternoon, during the final week of school, Aisha received an unexpected invitation. The principal, Mr. Harris, asked her to give a speech at the end-of-year assembly. At first she hesitated. Public speaking wasn't something she enjoyed, and she worried about drawing too much attention to herself. But after some encouragement from her teachers and friends, including Derek, she agreed. If there was ever a time to share her story and inspire others, this was it. On the day of the assembly, the auditorium buzzed with excitement. Students filed in, chatting animatedly about summer plans and swapping phone numbers before the break. When Aisha walked onto the stage, the room fell silent. All eyes were on her as she stood behind the podium, her posture tall and confident. For a moment she scanned the crowd, taking in the sea of faces, then with a deep breath she began to speak. "Hi everyone," she started, her voice steady and warm. "When I first came to Maplewood High, I didn't know what to expect. Moving to a new town and starting over isn't easy, especially when you feel like you don't quite fit in. But looking back now, I realize how much I've grown, not just as a student, but as a person." She paused, letting her words sink in. From the front row, Derek gave her an encouraging nod, which made her smile faintly. "One thing my grandfather always taught me is that strength isn't about being better than someone else. It's about being the best version of yourself. Martial arts aren't just about fighting. They're about discipline, patience, and understanding. They're about respecting others and knowing when to use your power and when not to." The audience listened intently, hanging on her every word. Aisha continued, sharing snippets of her childhood and the lessons she had learned from Master Kwame. She talked about the importance of standing up for yourself without resorting to violence unless absolutely necessary. She emphasized that true strength comes from within, and that kindness is often the bravest choice we can make. Then, turning slightly toward Derek, she added, "Sometimes we meet people who challenge us in ways we never imagined. They force us to look inside ourselves and decide who we want to be. I'm grateful for those challenges because they've helped me grow, and I hope that all of you will embrace the opportunities to learn and change, no matter where life takes you." Her speech ended with a standing ovation. Students clapped and cheered, many of them moved to tears by her heartfelt words. Even Mr. Harris wiped his glasses discreetly, clearly touched by the impact Aisha had made on the school community. As she stepped off the stage, several students rushed up to thank her, telling her how much her story meant to them. Later that evening, Aisha found herself sitting on the steps outside the school building, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Derek joined her, plopping down beside her with a grin. "That was amazing," he said, nudging her playfully. "You really nailed it." Aisha chuckled softly. "Thanks. I was nervous, though. I didn't think anyone would care what I had to say." "Oh, they cared," Derek assured her. "Trust me. You're kind of a legend around here now." She shook her head, laughing lightly. "I'm not a legend, I'm just me." "Well, just you is pretty impressive," Derek replied, his tone sincere. After a brief pause, he added, "Hey, listen, I wanted to say thanks. Not just for today, but for everything. You've changed my life, Aisha. I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay you for that." Aisha looked at him, her expression softening. "You already have," she said gently, "by changing yourself. That's the greatest gift you could give, to yourself and to everyone else." Drew nodded, absorbing her words. They sat together in companionable silence, enjoying the peacefulness of the moment. For both of them, it felt like closure. Chance to reflect on how far they'd come and look forward to what lay ahead. The last day of school arrived, bringing with it a mix of emotions. Excitement bubbled in the air as students hugged goodbye, promising to stay in touch over the summer. Aisha packed up her locker for the final time, tucking away mementos and memories from her time at Maplewood High. As she closed the metal door, she felt a pang of nostalgia. Despite its challenges, this place had become home. Before leaving, she spotted Derek waiting for her near the main entrance. He held out a folded piece of paper, looking almost shy. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "It's my number, just in case you ever need anything or if you just want to catch up sometime." Aisha smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thanks, Derek. I'll definitely keep in touch." With that, they exchanged a quick hug before parting ways. As Aisha walked toward the bus stop, she glanced back one last time, taking in the familiar sight of the school building. Though her chapter at Maplewood High was ending, she knew the lessons she had learned would stay with her forever. And as the bus pulled away, carrying her toward whatever adventures awaited, Aisha couldn't help but feel hopeful. Change wasn't always easy, but it was possible, with enough courage, compassion, and belief in oneself. She had seen it happen firsthand, not only in herself, but in Derek and the entire school community. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it head on, armed with the wisdom of Shaolin and the strength of her own heart. The summer after Aisha's time at Maplewood High was a whirlwind of new beginnings and reflections. Moving to Maplewood had been an unexpected chapter in her life, one she hadn't anticipated would leave such a profound mark. Yet as the days passed, it became clear that her experiences there were more than just fleeting memories. They were lessons that would shape her for years to come. Aisha spent much of her summer reconnecting with her roots. Back in Boston, she resumed training under her grandfather, Master Kwame, who greeted her return with open arms and a knowing smile. "You've grown," he said simply when she walked into the dojo, his eyes twinkling with pride. It wasn't just her martial arts skills that had improved. It was her spirit. There was a newfound confidence in the way she carried herself, a quiet strength that spoke volumes about the journey she'd been on. Master Kwame listened intently as Aisha recounted her story, her first encounter with Derek, the rumors that followed, and the eventual transformation of both Derek and the school culture. He nodded thoughtfully, occasionally offering words of wisdom or sharing anecdotes from his own life. Every challenge is an opportunity to grow, he reminded her. And every person you meet has something to teach you, whether they mean to or not. As the weeks went by, Aisha found herself mentoring younger students at the dojo, passing down the same principles her grandfather had instilled in her. She taught them not only how to throw a punch or execute a kick, but also how to cultivate patience, humility, and inner peace. Watching their faces light up with excitement as they mastered new techniques filled her with joy. In those moments, she realized that her legacy extended far beyond Maplewood. It was rooted in the values she shared with others. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Maplewood, Derek was navigating his own path of growth. Without Aisha physically present to guide him, he leaned heavily on the lessons she had imparted. At first, it was difficult. Old habits die hard, and there were moments when frustration threatened to pull him back into his former ways. But each time he felt tempted to lash out, he remembered Aisha's calm demeanor and unwavering resolve. He reminded himself that real strength came from choosing kindness over anger, understanding over judgment. Derek threw himself into helping others, finding purpose in acts of service. He volunteered at a local community center, coaching kids, in basketball and organizing workshops on conflict resolution. The children adored him, seeing him not as the bully he used to be, but as a role model who genuinely cared about their well-being. One afternoon, while teaching a group of boys how to dribble, he caught sight of Tommy, the sophomore whose glasses he had once smashed, watching from the sidelines. Smiling warmly, Derek waved him over. "Hey, Tommy," he said, handing him a ball. "Want to join us?" Tommy hesitated for a moment, then nodded shyly. As they played together, Derek marveled at how far they'd both come. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it was possible. And seeing Tommy laugh and enjoy himself made Derek feel like he was finally on the right track. Back in Boston, Aisha kept in touch with Derek through occasional texts and calls. Though their lives had taken different directions, their bond remained strong. They exchanged updates about their respective journeys, cheering each other on from afar. During one phone call, Derek admitted, "I still mess up sometimes, but I'm trying. And knowing you believe in me makes all the difference." Aisha smiled, touched by his honesty. "We're all works in progress," she replied. "What matters is that you keep moving forward." By the time autumn rolled around, both Aisha and Derek had settled into their new routines. For Aisha, this meant preparing for college applications and continuing her work at the dojo. For Derek, it meant embracing his role as a leader and advocate within his community. Neither of them could have predicted how much their lives would intertwine again, even from a distance. One crisp October evening, Aisha received a package in the mail. Curious, she opened it to find a framed photograph of her and Derek standing side by side at Maplewood High, surrounded by smiling students. On the back, Derek had written a simple message. "Thanks for showing me what true strength looks like. You'll always be my hero." Tears welled up in Aisha's eyes as she held the photo close. It was a reminder that the impact we have on others often stretches far beyond what we can see. Her actions at Maplewood High hadn't just changed Derek. They had inspired countless others to stand up for themselves, embrace kindness, and strive for a better world. As winter approached, Aisha sat down to write an essay for her college application. The prompt asked her to describe a challenge she had faced and how it had shaped her. Staring at the blank page, she thought back to her first day at Maplewood High, the fear, the uncertainty, the courage it took to confront Derek. She wrote about the power of resilience, the importance of empathy, and the beauty of transformation. By the time she finished, she knew it was the most honest piece of writing she had ever produced. Months later, when acceptance letters began arriving, Aisha was thrilled to learn she had been accepted into her dream university, a prestigious school known for its emphasis on leadership and social justice. As she celebrated with her family, she couldn't help but think about the winding road that had led her here. If not for her time at Maplewood High, she might never have discovered the depth of her own strength or the ripple effect of compassion. On her final visit to Maplewood before leaving for college, Aisha decided to stop by the park where she had practiced martial arts during her time there. The trees were bare now, their branches reaching skyward like skeletal hands. She stood in the same spot where Derek had watched her train, memories flooding back. It was here that everything had shifted, not just for her but for Derek and the entire school. As she turned to leave, she noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was Derek, bundled up in a thick jacket against the cold. His face broke into a wide grin when he saw her. "I heard you got into your dream school," he said proudly. "Congratulations." "Thanks," Aisha replied, hugging him tightly. "I couldn't have done it without you." They spent the afternoon catching up, laughing about old memories and dreaming about the future. Before parting ways, Derek handed her a small notebook. "It's full of quotes and thoughts that remind me of you," he explained, "in case you need a little inspiration while you're away." Aisha flipped through the pages, touched by the effort he had put into it. Each entry was a testament to the bond they had forged, a bond built on mutual respect, growth, and understanding. As she boarded the bus back to Boston, clutching the notebook close, Aisha felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her journey at Maplewood High had been challenging, yes, but it had also been transformative. She had faced adversity head-on, inspired change, and formed friendships that would last a lifetime. And though her next adventure awaited, one thing was certain. Wherever life took her, she would carry the lessons of Maplewood in her heart. Because true strength isn't measured by how many battles you win. It's about the lives you touch along the way. The days following Derek's apology marked a turning point not just for him, but for the entire atmosphere at Maplewood High. Word of his encounter with Aisha and her extraordinary skills had spread like wildfire through the school. Students whispered about her in hushed tones during class, speculating about her mysterious background and martial arts prowess. Some even gave her nicknames like Shaolin Girl or the Quiet Warrior. While Aisha didn't pay much attention to the rumors, she couldn't help but notice how people began treating her differently. Instead of being ignored or dismissed as an outsider, Aisha found herself surrounded by curious classmates who wanted to learn more about her. At first, she was hesitant to share too much. Her training under Master Kwame had always been deeply personal, a sacred bond between her and her grandfather. But as questions poured in from genuine admirers, she decided to open up a little. During lunch breaks, she started sharing small stories about growing up in Boston and learning the ways of Shaolin martial arts. She spoke about the importance of discipline, patience, and inner peace, emphasizing that martial arts weren't just about fighting, but also about self-improvement and respect. Her words resonated with many students, especially those who felt invisible or powerless in Derek's shadow. For years, they had lived in fear of his bullying, too scared to stand up for themselves or others. Seeing Aisha confront Derek and win inspired them to believe that change was possible. Slowly but surely, the culture of fear that Derek had cultivated began to crumble, replaced by a newfound sense of hope and courage. Meanwhile, Derek himself was undergoing a transformation. After witnessing Aisha's martial arts practice in the park and hearing her explanation about the philosophy behind it, he couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. Respect wasn't earned through intimidation, it came from treating others fairly. These ideas were foreign to him, yet they made perfect sense. He realized that his entire identity as the tough guy was built on shaky ground, an illusion meant to mask his own insecurities. Determined to prove that he could change, Derek began observing Aisha more closely. Instead of stalking her out of anger or jealousy, he watched her interactions with other students. What struck him most was how effortlessly she commanded respect without demanding it. Whether she was helping a struggling student understand algebra or comforting a freshman who felt homesick, Aisha radiated kindness and authenticity. Her actions spoke louder than any words ever could, and Derek couldn't help but admire her for it. One day after school, Derek mustered the courage to approach her again. This time, he didn't hide behind trees or benches. He walked straight, up to her as she sat reading a book under a tree near the football field. "Hey," he said awkwardly, scratching the back of his head. "Can I, sit here?" Aisha looked up from her book, surprised but not unwelcoming. "Sure," she replied, closing the book and setting it aside. Derek plopped down beside her, fidgeting nervously. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched until Derek finally broke it. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice hesitant, "about what you said the other day about respect and all that." Aisha tilted her head slightly, studying him with mild curiosity. "And?" "Well," Derek sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I guess I never really thought about it before. I mean, I always thought being tough meant scaring people into doing what I wanted. But now I see that's not real toughness, is it? Real strength is about earning respect, not taking it." Aisha nodded slowly, pleased to hear him articulate such insight. "That's right," she said softly. "True strength comes from within. It's about knowing who you are and staying true to yourself no matter what anyone else says or does." Derek absorbed her words, letting them sink in. "So, how do I start changing?" he asked earnestly. "I don't want to be that guy anymore, the bully who picks on everyone. But I don't know where to begin." Aisha smiled faintly, sensing his sincerity. "Start small," she advised. "Apologize to the people you've hurt. Be kind when you can. Stand up for someone who needs help. Change doesn't happen overnight, but every step counts." Encouraged by her advice, Derek decided to take action. Over the next few weeks, he made a conscious effort to mend fences with those he had wronged. He approached Tommy, a shy sophomore, whose glasses he had once smashed in a fit of rage, and offered to buy him a new pair. To his surprise, Tommy accepted the gesture, though he remained wary. Derek also reached out to Lily, a quiet girl who often ate alone in the cafeteria because Derek had mocked her for bringing homemade lunches. One afternoon, he joined her at her table, striking up a conversation about her favorite books. Though their interaction was awkward at first, Lily eventually warmed up to him, grateful for the unexpected olive branch. As Derek continued to reach out, his efforts didn't go unnoticed. Other students began to see glimpses of the person he was trying to become, a kinder, more thoughtful version of himself. Some were skeptical at first, convinced that his sudden change of heart was just another act. But over time, his consistent behavior chipped away at their doubts, earning him a tentative form of trust. For Aisha, watching Derek's transformation was both surprising and rewarding. She hadn't expected him to take her words so seriously, let alone act on them. Yet she couldn't deny the positive impact he was having on the school. Without realizing it, Derek had become an unlikely ally in promoting a culture of kindness and respect. Their relationship evolved as well. What had started as animosity turned into mutual respect, and eventually friendship. Derek often sought Aisha's guidance when he struggled with old habits creeping back in. In return, he supported her initiatives to create a safer, more inclusive environment at Maplewood High. Together, they organized workshops on conflict resolution and anti-bullying strategies, inviting local community leaders to speak to the students. These events sparked meaningful conversations about empathy, diversity, and standing up for one another. By the end of the semester, the shift in the school's dynamics was undeniable. Teachers noticed fewer incidents of bullying and more instances of collaboration among students. Even the hallways felt brighter, filled with laughter and camaraderie instead of tension and fear. Aisha and Derek had played pivotal roles in this transformation, proving that even the smallest acts of courage could ripple outward and inspire lasting change. Yet despite the progress, Aisha remained humble. She knew that true growth took time and that setbacks were inevitable. Still, she held on to the belief that everyone deserved a chance to rewrite their story, including Derek. And as she looked around at the smiling faces of her peers, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that she had helped plant the seeds of positivity in a place that once seemed so resistant to it. Little did she know, her journey was far from over. As the final bell rang on the last day of school, signaling the start of summer vacation. Aisha couldn't shake the feeling that her experiences at Maplewood High were only the beginning of something much bigger.